Hey guys, tonight we're rewinding the clock way back to the stone towers and drafty corridors of medieval castles. You're not a knight or a peasant or even a scheming noble. Nope, you've just been born. A baby girl with royal blood in her veins, a name preloaded with political consequences, and absolutely no idea what's coming next. You've just taken your first royal breath as a princess in the Middle Ages, which sounds glamorous, right? Yeah, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and local time in the comments so we can see whose bedtime aligns with royalty and who's just here for the late night drama. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive screaming, wet and squishy. About average for a medieval newborn, but you're wrapped in way more linen than most. The room you're born into isn't sterile, it's a slightly claustrophobic chamber deep within a stone fortress. The air smells of beeswax candles, dried herbs, and faintly of mildew. Someone's been burning rosemary to purify the air, but let's be real, this is the 1200s, and no one really understands germs. Still, your birth has been treated as a near-holy event. A royal midwife oversees everything, muttering prayers and checking you for any signs of divine favour, or curse. A crooked toe might be seen as a prophecy. A birthmark? Well, you better hope it's a lucky one. There's no such thing as privacy. A crowd has gathered outside your mother's birthing chamber, probably including courtiers, clergy, and maybe even a few nobles peeking through the door like it's a medieval baby unboxing video. If you were a boy, cheers would erupt instantly. But since you're a girl, the applause is more polite, quiet, maybe a little disappointed. Not that you can tell. You're too busy screaming, confused, and probably freezing because medieval castles have the insulation of a wet sponge. You're whisked away to be cleaned, not with any kind of gentle soap, but more likely with wine or vinegar to strengthen you. Then you're swaddled so tightly in cloth strips you resemble a tiny white mummy. They believe this helps your limbs grow straight, but mostly it makes you unable to move. It's like being born and immediately put into a medieval straitjacket. Congratulations. But your true first royal moment comes when your gender is announced to the public. A herald steps out and declares, in overly ceremonial Latin, that a daughter has been born unto the house of insert dynastic name here. Maybe there's a procession, maybe bells are rung, maybe your father pretends to be happy about it, but somewhere in the castle someone is already updating your marriage value, like you're a rare trading card. Your mother, by this way, is still recovering. There's no epidural, no postnatal care team, just a whole lot of superstition, and maybe a nun whispering psalms. Childbirth is terrifyingly lethal in this era, and your survival is celebrated, but hers might hang in the balance. In fact, it's considered so dangerous that women are encouraged to write confessions and wills before going into labour. Yep, motherhood begins with a healthy dose of mortal dread. As for you, little royal baby, your survival is not guaranteed. Infant mortality is brutal. You're born into a class that gets the best food, warmest clothes, and access to rare herbs. But even that's a coin toss. Infection, fever, or something as simple as jaundice could end you before your first birthday. And yet there's already a scribe updating the lineage scroll, writing your name in ornate script like it's carved into history. For all the risk, your existence is political gold. A few strange rituals follow your birth. You're likely baptized within days, if not hours. The church doesn't mess around with the eternal fate of baby souls. The water's cold, the priest mumbles Latin, and someone probably waves incense over your squishy little head. In the royal nursery, charms are hung to ward off evil spirits, like iron keys or saint bones. Actual bones. You might even be laid on a sword during the ceremony, a symbol of your family's power. They say it's tradition. You have no idea what's happening, but the sword is cold, and you're definitely not sleeping through this. Already, your place in the kingdom is being crafted around you. A tutor of heraldry is probably sketching up emblems that will eventually include you. A court poet writes a stanza about your rosy cheeks and glorious destiny. A midwife tells the queen that your tiny pinky finger curved just so, which means you'll marry someone grand across the sea, because of course it does. And here's a quirky little medieval fact. In some courts, people believed that the way a baby sneezed in the first few hours of life predicted their temperament. One cute sneeze. you'll be clever and obedient. No sneeze, you're obviously cursed. There are even accounts of attendants blowing herbs in royal babies' faces on purpose to induce a lucky sneeze. No pressure, infant you. Now, let's talk about the scholarly debates. Historians still argue over how much agency medieval royal mothers had in the early care of their children. Some scholars believe that highborn women were deeply involved, overseeing wet nurses and caretakers, choosing religious tutors and regulating the nursery staff. Others think noble women were mostly removed, spending post-birth recovery and confinement, while wet nurses handled everything, and babies were basically raised by the court machinery. Evidence swings both ways depending on region, rank, and specific household. So the truth? It's hazy. Just know that your own mother may be right beside you, or miles away recovering with a healing potion and a lot of leeches. So here you are, tightly swaddled, head nestled in silk-stuffed linen, placed in a crib carved with lions and lilies. You can't lift your head yet. You can't speak. But already, your entire life path is shaped by centuries of bloodline, landholdings, and potential alliances. You're not just a baby, you're a diplomatic asset. The castle is quiet now, except for the muffled echo of guards changing shift and a distant owl hooting from a stone turret. In your cradle you squirm under layers of linen, while a nursemaid hums a lullaby in Old French. You're still learning to blink, to breathe steadily, to exist in this strange candlelit world where your every cry is logged, interpreted, and occasionally punished. One day, you'll rule lands or broker peace treaties, or maybe you'll die in childbirth at 19. But for now, you just hiccup softly and drift off under the watch of a nurse who smells faintly of lavender and boiled onions. Sleep tight, little princess. You're a few weeks old now, maybe a couple of months, and honestly, you're already a full-time project. Not in the look how precious way most modern babies get doted on, but in the high-stakes, multi-staff, security-cleared way that makes you a breathing political investment. You're not fed on demand, you're fed according to celestial charts. Your cries are noted like omens, and while your parents might peek in occasionally, it's the army of caretakers around you who really run the show. Your days begin with a check of your swaddling, which is still wrapped so tightly you can't bend anything. They believe this helps bones grow straight, because in the Middle Ages people are oddly obsessed with symmetry. To them, it's not just pretty, it's holy. Crooked limbs, sign of spiritual corruption, so you stay wrapped like a spring roll until someone decides your body's hard enough to hold its shape. Let's talk about feeding, because this part is complicated. You're not suckling at your mother's breast, that's way too lowbrow for a royal princess. Instead, you've been handed off to a wet nurse, a lower-ranking woman with a sturdy build, strong reputation, and full milk supply. She's been vetted like a government contractor. Her morals, background and health have been scrutinised to an absurd degree. If she's had sex recently, she's off the list. If her last baby died, off the list. If she sneezes the wrong way, she's gone. The stakes are that high. This wet nurse might live in the castle full-time or in a private chamber near the nursery. She breastfeeds you several times a day, sings to you in her own dialect, definitely not court-approved French or Latin, and essentially becomes your first attachment figure. In some cases, princesses formed lifelong emotional bonds with their wet nurses, sometimes more affection than they ever showed their actual mothers. You might even call her mother in your early speech. That's the kind of tangled, emotional contradiction this life is full of. Your crib is extravagant, but far from safe. Wood-carved lions or saints lean over you like silent judges. You've got no concept of danger, but if you did, you'd notice the fine silks and furs in your bedding are massive fire hazards, and the room's fireplace is both open and unpredictable. But the flickering glow is soothing, and your nursemaid knows how to keep you warm without setting your future on fire. Most days you're paraded out to the royal hall, if only briefly. This is where visiting nobles and clergy can clap eyes on you and murmur things like, "Strong legs for a girl," or "She looks clever." These comments matter. Physical appearance is heavily politicised. If your skin tone seems too ruddy, or your head too narrow, rumours start. There's an entire category of medieval astrology and medicine that reads a baby's features like tea leaves. A wide forehead, you'll be wise, a cleft chin, decisive, a lazy eye, cursed obviously. In certain courts, you're fed special mixtures meant to stimulate intelligence, honey thinned with goat's milk, or soft mashed almonds if you're really fancy. Sometimes you're even given wine-diluted gruel because water isn't trusted. It's basically like getting a baby cappuccino, minus the foam. The results? Probably indigestion and confused crying, but everyone seems convinced you're on track to become a diplomatic prodigy. Now, for a fun fringe fact. Some medieval parents would try to shape their infants' skulls with tight head wrappings to get that ideal, noble dome. The practice wasn't widespread across all regions, but it did happen in some aristocratic households. You'd be swaddled around the torso and then have your head gently, but persistently, bound into a preferred shape. Your nurse might pat your forehead and mutter something about divine proportion while adjusting the wrap. Comfort. Not even on the list of priorities. Meanwhile, music is a big part of your early life. Minstrels are occasionally summoned to play gentle lute melodies to soothe your moods, or monks might chant psalms nearby. Not for your benefit, mind you, more to please the grown-ups and pretend your cooing means you're already holy. Sometimes the court invites local prophets or holy women to gaze upon you, which always ends in either weeping joy or quiet dread, depending on what they see. At the same time, your body is watched obsessively for signs of the supernatural. Coughing fits could be seen as divine testing, hiccups as signs of future prophecy, and heaven forbid you laugh too early. That's the kind of thing that sends people scrambling for relics to hang over your crib. Religious symbolism surrounds everything, from the linens you lie on to the lullabies hummed over you. You're not just a baby, you're a vessel of potential miracles, or demons, or divine retribution. It really depends on who's doing the interpreting. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about how rigidly these rituals were followed in different regions. In France and England, some records show more liberal parenting in royal circles, where affection and personal involvement were encouraged by queens. In contrast, parts of the Holy Roman Empire leaned heavier on symbolic rituals and isolation. The truth? Likely a chaotic blend. Customs weren't uniform. Some princesses grew up in warm, attentive nurseries with lots of emotional care. Others were more or less tiny, expensive mannequins for diplomacy. What's consistent is this. Your presence is a chess piece on the royal board, and every burp you make is read like a scroll from heaven. You are the physical embodiment of your family's future alliances, land claims, and peace treaties. Your father might hold you up like Simba from The Lion King during court presentations, but he's already mentally charting who you'll be promised to in marriage by age 3. And here's the real kicker. You don't even get a baby blanket of your own. Most items in your nursery are heirloom objects. The cradle might have once held your mother, or your grandfather. There's symbolism in everything. The linen cloth wrapped around your legs might have been cut from a priest's robe. The bells tied near your bed, blessed by a bishop last spring. Even the wooden rattle in your hand has a carved inscription of a saint's name, because apparently you need spiritual protection and hand-eye coordination. And yet, as dusk settles outside the stone walls and your caretakers settle you in for the night, there is a kind of warmth here. A lullaby in a half-forgotten language drifts through the nursery. The fire crackles low. Somewhere in the castle a dog barks twice. Then silence. Your wet nurse rocks you gently, one hand patting your back in time with a whispered prayer. Maybe she smiles down at you. Maybe she whispers your future name with something like hope. You fall asleep not knowing that your entire world is built on rituals, prophecies, and the fear of what one little princess might become. You're a bit older now, just past the baby stage, rolling unsteadily into toddler territory, and suddenly you're not just a symbol anymore. You're a person, a very small, very loud, highly scrutinized person, and it's time to give you a name, not a sweet one chosen from a baby book. Number. This name is going to be dissected by theologians, judged by nobles, and possibly double-checked against ancient prophecies. Naming a princess in the Middle Ages is a full-blown diplomatic maneuver. The ceremony is a big deal. You don't just wake up one day and someone calls you Isabella. There are layers. Your name might honour a saint, match a legendary ancestor, or be chosen to please a politically valuable uncle in Aquitaine. It's not about what sounds nice with your complexion. It's about legacy, strategy, and tradition. You might be named after your grandmother to tie you back to her powerful lineage, or after a queen who once brought peace during a brutal war. Cute nicknames? Not part of the package. When they finally land on your name, let's say it's Eleanor because that's a solid royal option, it's announced with a flourish. A priest might chant it aloud in Latin. A herald could read it from a scroll in the Great Hall. Sometimes it's sewn into banners and hung across castle walls. Congratulations, you're now officially a brand. What they don't mention is that your name is also a sort of legal contract. It binds you to the expectations of your family line. If you were named after a fierce queen, you're expected to be sharp, diplomatic, and maybe a little intimidating. If you're named after a pious martyr, well, good luck having any fun. And if you're the third Eleanor in 5 generations, you're now part of a long-running PR campaign for stability, fertility, and successful dynastic marriages. How fun. There's also a chance, just a whisper, really, that your name has already been listed in multiple marriage agreements, even before you've taken your first independent steps. That's right. In the back halls of the castle, while you're busy trying to bite your own foot, adults have been sliding ink across parchment, casually promising you to various dukes, earls, or foreign princes. They write things like, in the event of future alliance, and upon reaching suitable age. You, meanwhile, are still obsessed with chasing shadows on the floor. But oh, your name travels faster than you do. Couriers carry word of your existence and identity to distant courts. In some distant city, a royal boy, not much older than you, is told your name by his tutor and asked to remember it. Because one day, that might be his wife. These names get embedded in political memory, marked on family trees like tiny alliance flags. Eleanor, Margaret, Matilda. They don't sound like toddlers. They sound like chapters in a dynastic war chronicle. Now here's a quirky side note for you. Some royal babies were given milk names before their formal ones. Basically, a placeholder nickname used by wet nurses and staff until the grand announcement. Things like Mina or Tula or even Little Star. It was a kind of private affection before politics moved in. These names sometimes stuck behind the scenes, whispered by servants or embroidered into hidden corners of linens. Small signs that even princesses were once soft, snuggly creatures before they became chess pieces. Once you're officially named, your identity starts crystallizing. You get your own banner, probably embroidered with your family's coat of arms combined with your mother's lineage. It hangs behind your cradle like a very medieval birth announcement. The emblem is stitched in gold thread by someone who's half blind and paid in loaves of bread. But it's beautiful and entirely for show. You're also given a small personalised prayer book, even though you can't read. It's inscribed with a blessing and probably filled with illustrations of animals looking suspiciously like lumpy horses. Still, this is considered one of your first royal possessions. You'll be told it was a sacred gift, handed down for generations, even if it was actually made last Tuesday. By now you're more mobile, maybe waddling around the nursery, pulling at curtain tassels and falling into chairs, and you're watched constantly. Your name is now power, and power can't be left alone. A governess supervises your activities, often a strict woman from a noble but lesser family, brought in specifically to teach you obedience, modesty, and how not to embarrass anyone important. You're reminded to bow, to smile, delicately, and not to shriek like a commoner when startled by loud noises. These lessons begin before you can form full sentences. Outside the nursery, the court is already gossiping about your temperament. Are you curious, moody, sharp-eyed, easily frightened? All of this will be written down and shared, quietly, among those who matter. You're becoming a character in other people's stories, and your name, Eleanor, remember, starts to carry weight. There's also a theological layer. Your name is used in prayers, in ceremonies, and even in oaths. Soldiers might swear loyalty to the House of Eleanor if you become part of a key alliance. Monks might write it into monastery records as part of their regular blessings for the royal family. You become immortal on parchment long before you have any idea what immortality means. Now, here's a debate among scholars. Did medieval royal girls internalise their political role early on, or were they more sheltered from it during their first years? Some argue that girls were kept in a bubble of ritual and comfort until they were old enough to understand their responsibilities. Others claim that from the moment they could walk, princesses were coached, corrected, and cultivated like bonsai trees, shaped and trimmed into proper ladyhood. The historical record is patchy, but evidence leans toward the latter. You may not know what the Holy Roman Empire is, but by age 3, you definitely know not to slurp when important people are watching. And here's the emotional kicker. Sometimes, you say your name out loud when no one's around. In that echoey nursery, with cold stone walls and a distant harp playing somewhere in the castle, you whisper it to yourself, Eleanor. Not because you understand its power yet, but because it feels like the one thing that's yours. Your governess corrects your pronunciation. A nurse claps and says, Very good, my lady. But deep down, it's still just a sound on your tongue. You're still figuring out what it means. The castle settles into night again. A fire flickers low. Someone brushes your hair with a carved comb made from whalebone, saying your name with reverence like a prayer. Eleanor, you've only just begun your life, and already the world expects you to change the course of history. You're about 4 now, maybe 5, and the nursery feels smaller every day, not physically, but spiritually. You've outgrown the crib, ditched the linen swaddles, and can almost recite a proper table blessing without messing up the Latin. Almost. Now you begin to notice things, like how your wet nurse no longer kisses your forehead in public, how your governess bows before speaking to you, or how the castle servants whisper when you pass, calling you the little lady instead of your name. Your world is shifting, and it's full of people watching you just a little too closely. The court is obsessed with omens. Everything you do is read like a sacred text. One morning you sneeze during morning prayers. A servant claims it's a sign you'll bring peace. Another day you throw a wooden spoon in a tantrum and hit a noble in the ankle. The court jester turns it into a song. A few people laugh, a few do not. In this world, even your tantrums get circulated like political gossip. You're still surrounded by women mostly. They keep you clean, dressed, modest and polite. Some of them adore you, some resent you. A few, especially the older ones, treat you like a holy object, to be adored but never touched without ceremony. They speak of you in hushed tones when you're not in the room, arguing over whether you're clever like your father or solemn like your mother. Your every feature is examined, your quirks turned into prophecy. If you favour your left hand, someone calls it a sign of wickedness. If you laugh in your sleep, a priest is summoned to bless your bedding. You spend hours sitting still while people arrange you. Hair must be brushed, braided, pinned and occasionally threaded with ribbons. Your clothes are stiff, beautiful, and wildly uncomfortable. You're learning to be ornamental. You learn not to complain because complaints are unbecoming. A proper princess smiles when her head itches under a lace coif. She thanks the tailor even when the seams dig into her arms. You're learning that your body isn't really your own. It belongs to the court's image of what a princess should be. Your schedule is now ruled by structure. Morning prayers, light breakfast, usually bland, cold and presented with too much pageantry, then lessons. Not real reading yet. Your Latin is shaky, and no one expects you to master theology before your 6th birthday, but you're being taught how to sit through lessons. A soft-spoken tutor walks you through psalms and simple moral tales, each with a moral that usually boils down to obey your elders, honour the church, marry wisely. But what you notice more than anything now is the way people talk when they think you're not listening. The murmurs behind velvet curtains, the servants' whispers as they pour, wine for your parents in the great hall. They talk about you, about who you'll marry, about which kingdom will claim you. Some joke that you'll be queen of somewhere with more sheep than sense. Others mention heirs and alliances and dowries, as if you're already a numbered asset in a giant moody ledger. That gossip doesn't stay in the halls. It makes its way into the nursery, dripping in through bedtime stories and mealtime chatter. One day, your husband might be a great king, your governess says as she spoons warm broth into your bowl. Perhaps you'll bring peace to 2 warring houses. You nod, pretending you understand. But really you're just wondering what a warring house looks like. Do they throw furniture? Let's not forget the astrologers. Yes, you still have those. Bearded men with ink-stained fingers come to read the stars for hints about your future. They unroll scrolls, sketch your birth chart, and point at the ceiling like the answers are painted on the rafters. If Jupiter was rising when you were born, they say you'll be diplomatic. If Mars was dominant, you'll be brave. One astrologer makes the mistake of saying you might have a tragic romance. He's dismissed before sundown. There's a wonderfully strange historical footnote here. Some medieval courts believed that early exposure to beauty could shape a child's soul. So your caretakers fill your room with tapestries, stained glass windows, and carved figurines of saints and mythical creatures. No toys, really, just beautifully rendered objects you're not allowed to touch. A unicorn carved from bone, a knight with a ruby eye. These things surround you like glittering guardians meant to elevate your spirit. You don't know that yet, You just know they're prettier than the stale biscuits at breakfast. You've also started asking questions, dangerous ones according to the grown-ups. You ask why the firewood smells different today, why one lady in waiting no longer comes to braid your hair, why you can't play outside like the stable boys. These questions are met with soft rebukes or redirected with a new book of illustrated psalms. A favourite technique is to quote scripture at you. To everything there is a season. Translation, stop asking why. But sometimes, late at night, your governess loosens. When the castle grows still and the torches flicker low, she tells you real stories. Not the ones from the prayer books, but tales of queens who disguised themselves as knights, of princesses who ran away and lived in towers by the sea. She always ends with, "But that's just a story," and kisses your forehead. Still, you fall asleep imagining that you're the kind of princess who climbs cliffs barefoot, who outwits pirates and returns only when she feels like it. There's an academic debate about how much creative storytelling royal girls were actually exposed to. Some believe fairy tales were actively suppressed for young noble women, who were instead fed a steady diet of moralistic lessons and sanitized saints' lives. Others argue that folklore flourished in the nurseries, told in secret by nurses and older servants. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. An official curriculum of obedience spiced with after-hours rebellion whispered by moonlight. And then there's the corridor you're not allowed to enter. Every castle has one. It's dark, always cold, and often leads to somewhere important, like your father's war chamber or your mother's private chapel. You're told to stay away. Naturally, it becomes the one place you think about constantly. You tiptoe near it sometimes, just to feel the thrill of forbidden air. One night you sneak halfway down it before your slipper squeaks against a stone. A voice calls your name, your full name, and you freeze. Not because you're scared of punishment, but because you've never heard your name spoken like that before. Not lovingly, not reverently, just firmly, like it belongs to someone bigger than you. Back in bed, tucked under layers of wool and embroidered linen, you realise something. You're beginning to understand the weight of your name, of your place. The castle is your home, but it's also your stage, your prison, your destiny. You're 6 now, maybe 7, and you no longer wobble when you walk. Your steps are light but deliberate, trained to glide across floors that echo too loudly if your heels strike wrong. You've got your own little retinue trailing behind you now, a pair of ladies in training, a governess whose neck seems permanently stiff from protocol, and a nursemaid who still sneaks you honeyed figs when no one's looking. You're not a toddler anymore. You're a functioning member of the royal household, which means you're expected to act like it. Even if you're still losing teeth, everything about your world is structured, down to how you're allowed to giggle. You've got princess posture now, a straight back, hands folded delicately, eyes lowered just enough to suggest humility, but not so much that people assume you're shy. Shyness is not desirable. You're not meant to fade into the stonework. You're meant to shimmer gently, like candlelight on polished armour, charming but not forward, visible but not demanding, polite but not so meek that you can't secure a marriage with a future king of somewhere dreary and rainy. Your toys are gone, replaced with instruments of future usefulness, tiny looms, a stylus and wax tablet, embroidery hoops. You're told over and over that a lady's hands should always be occupied, as idle fingers are the devil's playground. You stab yourself with a needle more than once and cry in silence, because no one wants a weepy princess. That's unbecoming. And you're nothing if not in the business of being become. Your daily wardrobe has tripled in complexity. You no longer wear soft tunics and simple slippers. You have formal gowns for dining, modest dresses for religious instruction, travelling cloaks lined with fur for church, and stiff ceremonial garb for the high feasts. Getting dressed takes a solid hour and involves multiple hands. If someone pulls the wrong lacing, you get the hiccups for an hour and everyone pretends not to notice. You are, of course, still under surveillance. You've learned to ignore the constant presence of eyes, the guards near every threshold, the ladies pretending not to watch you as you kneel at chapel, the servants who definitely aren't cleaning anything but always seem to be in the room. Privacy is not a luxury you have, or will ever have again. Even the walls feel like they're listening. Somewhere in the castle, adults are still debating what language to teach you first. Latin for the church, French for diplomacy, or maybe even a little Italian, just in case your marriage prospects tilt south. Your tutors have strong opinions. You just want to read fairy tales. Instead, you're drilled on proverbs and psalms until you can recite them while balancing a book on your head. You're taught to translate words like piety, virtue, and obedience long before you ever learn freedom. At meals, you sit still as a statue, surrounded by people twice your size who talk about things you only half understand. Grain tithes, treaties, heresies, the Duke of Something's recent gout attack. You're not allowed to interrupt. You're allowed to smile sweetly and say, "Thank you," when someone passes you the roasted turnips. It's like being trapped inside a dinner theatre where no one told you your role, but everyone still critiques your performance. Still, you find small joys. You like the embroidery lessons best, not because you're particularly good at it, but because it means you can sit quietly for long stretches and eavesdrop. The older girls gossip while stitching, sharing whispers about who's betrothed to whom, which lady wears perfume from the east, and who might be sneaking into the stables after sunset. You file it all away. Information is power, even if you're not supposed to wield it yet. Let's not skip the weird stuff, though. You've probably been subjected to at least one medical procedure by now. Maybe cupping, maybe bloodletting, definitely some kind of herbal tonic that tastes like dirt and regret. You've learned not to resist. If you say no, someone quotes scripture about obedience. Or worse, they say you're acting common. You sit still and let them poke, prod and paw whatever they think will strengthen your constitution. And when it's over, you get a candied almond and the privilege of not being scolded. Here's a quirky, less than pleasant historical truth. Many noble households had test meals prepared for royal children. A food taster, usually a servant of unfortunate rank, would eat a bite of your supper first just in case. Someone slipped in a little something deadly. Poison was always a looming fear, especially in courts with, shall we say, ambitious cousins. So while you nibble your honey cake and sip wine water from a pewter goblet, someone across the room is actively gambling with their intestines for your safety. Sweet dreams. Court gossip shifts once you start to lose your milk teeth. People start referring to you as a young lady, not a child. No one asks you what you think about that. They just expect you to behave like someone who knows the price of her own skin. You don't, not yet. But you're beginning to understand the game. You start to speak more carefully. You notice who gets what they want and how they ask for it. You observe who smiles and who shows their teeth. You try both and see which gets better results. There's a moment, midwinter maybe, when you're brought to a banquet and seated higher up than usual. You're close to your father, whose robes are lined in wolf fur, and he smells like cloves and steel. He doesn't look at you often, but when he does, it's with the same cool calculation he gives to maps. You wonder if he sees you, or just the treaties you'll be traded for. You don't cry, not here, not in front of all the lords and ladies watching you chew a pigeon leg with perfect etiquette. And here's something historians debate endlessly. Did medieval princesses feel royal in childhood? Did they internalise their status, or did they see themselves as little girls playing a role that slowly became real? Some argue that noble children were as steeped in their roles as fish in water, never questioning the structure. Others believe that children, especially girls, struggled against invisible walls, feeling the shape of the trap long before they had words to describe it. You just know the walls are too high to climb and the windows don't open wide enough to crawl through. At night, you still dream of running barefoot down the forbidden corridor. Sometimes you dream of forests and cloaks, of hiding your name and becoming someone else entirely. In the morning you wake up with your name stitched into your collar and a schedule laid out on parchment. You don't speak of the dreams, no one would understand. But you keep walking that line, small, precise, deliberate, between obedience and observation. You're not free, but you're learning. You're 8 now, maybe edging into 9, and there's something different in the air around you. An extra layer of pressure, like a velvet curtain drawn too tight around the edges of your world. You're still very much a child, but people have stopped treating you like one. Your dresses are longer, your titles are longer. The silences between people when they say your name, also longer. Everything is being stretched, except your freedom, which continues to shrink by the day. This is when you first hear the word expectations, in a tone that makes your stomach squirm. Not just once, but constantly. Expectations of your behaviour, your posture, your patience. Expectations of your knowledge of family history. Why it matters that your grandmother was once regent during a war, or how your cousin's marriage secured a port no one wants to explain to you. You're expected to understand that you're not just a girl, but a symbol, a carefully woven thread in a tapestry that's already older than you, and will keep growing long after you're gone. And because expectations are now fully in play, you're handed some of the most absurd toys imaginable. Tiny model castles made from ivory, a loot your fingers can barely stretch across, and dolls dressed like queens. But these dolls are different from the comforting cloth ones you had as a toddler. These ones come with miniature dowries, tiny chests full of fake jewels and fabric swatches. It's not play, it's training. Every game is preparing you to be someone's prize. Of course, there's the etiquette. Your life is now one long, grueling lesson in how not to make anyone else uncomfortable. You're taught to curtsy so deeply your knees creak. You practice how to enter a room and pause just long enough for everyone to notice your presence without appearing to demand attention. If your sleeves drag too low, if your laugh is too loud, or if you forget to stand when a bishop enters the room, you're corrected. Gently at first, then not so gently. Because a princess should never draw attention to her flaws. She should glide through the world like a breeze in a rose garden, soft, fragrant, and utterly forgettable unless someone's ready to pick her. You're also learning to entertain. That means dancing, or at least pretending to enjoy dancing while your governess claps off beat and makes you repeat the same bow 3 times because your angle lacks reverence. You also learn to play a few courtly songs on the harp, well enough to impress a visiting lord, not well enough to be taken seriously. Heaven forbid a royal girl is taken too seriously in any artistic capacity. You're here to charm, not outshine, perform, not create. You're introduced to what the court calls light diplomacy, which is a fancy way of saying you need to be sweet to people you dislike, especially children of other nobles. You're placed beside them at feasts. You're told to admire their gowns. You trade compliments like currency. Your curls are like spun gold. Your voice is sweeter than a lark's. You're also taught to deflect. If someone insults you, you smile and change the subject. If someone says your house is weak or your father is aging, you laugh softly and say, "God grants wisdom with years." Every sentence you speak is armour. Let's talk tutors. You now have more than one. There's the language tutor who drones on about syntax while gesturing dramatically at conjugations. There's the scripture tutor who smells like candle wax and insists you memorize long stretches of psalms in Latin. And then there's the manners tutor, who always seems vaguely disappointed in your existence. He watches you sip from a goblet and says things like, "No, no." A princess tilts the cup as if it's the Holy Grail. Gently, reverently. You wonder what would happen if you hurled it across the room. Probably nothing good. Of course, your education now includes your value, and by value, they mean your dowry. It's spoken of like a weather pattern. This looming thing no one can control but everyone prepares for. You hear numbers thrown around in whispers. How many acres of land? How many tapestries? How much silver? You're not part of these conversations, technically, but they still happen near enough that you can hear your name paired with terms like negotiation, bargaining power, and future yield. You're 8. You're still scared of thunder, but apparently you're also worth 3 castles and half a forest. A particularly bizarre fringe practice in some medieval courts involved dowry dolls, tiny wooden figures dressed in miniature wedding garments, each representing an element of your marriage prospects. You're given one. It has a painted face and an unsettling smile. Your governess says it represents your future. You bury it under a pillow and pretend you forgot where it went. Now for a real, ongoing historical debate. How early were royal girls truly involved in these courtship arrangements? Some scholars believe young princesses were kept blissfully unaware until marriage negotiations reached the final stages. Others argue that girls were gradually and deliberately groomed to accept their role as living treaties. They point to letters, portraits, and court records where very young girls were introduced to their future husbands during festive visits. The truth is probably both. Awareness arrived in waves, never all at once and never gently. Meanwhile, the palace dogs love you. They're not impressed by titles or etiquette. They bark, leap, and slobber, treating you like a gloriously under-supervised playmate. You sneak food to them beneath the table. They lick your hands in return. Your governess disapproves, of course. Dogs are messy and unseemly, but they don't care if your elbows are tucked or your Latin is wrong. They're the only creatures in the castle who see you for what you are, a child. There's a moment when you're walking through the castle garden, hand tucked in a silk muff to ward off the cold, when you see a servant girl laughing with her brother. They're filthy, playing in a puddle, and you envy them so hard your chest aches. For 1 second, you think about running into the mud, laughing too just to feel something that isn't rehearsed, but you don't. You keep walking because someone's always watching, and a princess doesn't play in puddles. A princess is the person people bow to, not the person who makes a splash. At night you lie in bed beneath a heavy canopy, half listening to the wind howl through the courtyard. You replay the day, every curtsy, every phrase you repeated like a charm, every moment you smiled when you wanted to scream. You whisper your name again, this time into the darkness, not for comfort but as a reminder. You are her, the one they keep preparing for something. You don't know what yet, but it's coming. You can feel it. Now you're 10, and everything is starting to feel sharper. The days are longer, the air a little colder, the smiles a little more forced. You're still small, still tucked into corners of the great hall during formal audiences, but you're no longer invisible. People notice you, how you move, how you speak, how quickly you pick things up. They don't say it directly, but it's clear. The bar has been raised. You're not just expected to behave now, you're expected to perform. And so enters your first real tutor. Not the gentle, distracted monks from before who let you trace letters with ink-stained fingers while they muttered prayers under their breath. This one is different. He arrives in a stiff black robe that makes a sound like whispering parchment every time he turns. His name is Master Godfrey, and you instantly hate how much he doesn't smile. His first lesson is brutal. He asks you to recite the Lord's Prayer in Latin, then critiques your pronunciation as though you're giving a papal speech. Then he makes you do it again, and again, until your throat stings and your ears are hot. This is your life now. Mornings begin with scripture, Latin declensions, and the ever-frustrating art of handwriting. You're made to sit with your back straight as a lance while copying lines about moral virtue. Every mistake earns a tap, not hard but hard enough, on your knuckles with the edge of a wooden rod. Precision, Master Godfrey says, is the root of discipline. You'd rather he root himself off the battlements, and it's not just Latin. You're learning courtly history, the genealogies of not only your own house, but those of surrounding kingdoms. You're expected to remember who married whom 3 generations ago, which duchess founded a convent, which lord rebelled and lost a thumb. This is the trivia of diplomacy, and you're fed it like porridge, bland but unavoidable. Outside of lessons, there are rehearsals. Yes, rehearsals. You're now coached in how to sit at banquets, how to rise when addressed by nobles, how to deliver greetings in multiple languages. You've learned the exact tilt of the head for every social rank, chin up for lords, down for priests, neutral for visiting emissaries. You've been taught how to walk slowly enough to appear graceful, but quickly enough not to be accused of vanity. Sometimes it feels like the castle is just one endless stage, and you're the reluctant lead in a show you never auditioned for. Meanwhile, the real world of adults continues around you, like a whispered storm. You hear arguments through stone walls, catch glimpses of furious faces behind silk curtains. The realm is never fully at peace, and while you're not privy to the details, you know enough to sense the tension. Taxes, land disputes, rumours of war, these hang over everything like winter fog. Your father's counsel meets more often, your mother prays longer, and you're being taught how to smile through it all. But there are moments, tiny fractures in the formality, where your real self escapes. One afternoon, you're led to the gardens to take in fresh air and natural beauty, which really means walking in circles under surveillance. You slip away briefly to a corner where the ivy grows thick and curling. Beneath it, you find a beetle with a metallic green shell and watch it crawl across your sleeve. It doesn't care who you are, it just wants to be warm. You keep it there for a few minutes before a maid notices and shoos it away with a nervous glance, whispering about unclean creatures. You miss the beetle for days afterward. You're also starting to grasp the unspoken ranking system of your household. It's not just about titles, it's about presence. The way your father's steward speaks louder than the visiting baron. The way your mother's lady-in-waiting can reduce other women to silence with a single glance. There are rules beneath the rules, and you're just beginning to read them. You test things. You offer small comments in Latin during supper. You ask your tutor about a foreign princess who escaped her arranged marriage by hiding in a convent. These experiments are met with raised brows, sometimes a sigh, but occasionally, just occasionally, someone smiles. a tiny sign that you're learning to walk the tightrope. Let's pause for a particularly weird fact. Some royal households used animals as educational tools. A particularly docile falcon might be shown to you, not to teach hunting, you're not allowed to actually do that, but to observe the discipline of nature. There's a belief that watching noble beasts reinforces noble